The workflow walkthrough. I took a walkabout with my camera the other day and captured some cityscape images around and about the Steel Stacks area of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So I thought today I'd run through a couple of images rather than just focusing on one, because we're going to see some different techniques in them. So first image I want to look at is this guy here. This is part of the ruins in the old Bethlehem steel area. And, I played a little game here and framed the moon inside one of the arches. And you can see on the left side here, I've applied several adjustments to this already. If we go back, we take a snapshot of it as it is. And then I go back to the basic image. You can see the before and after pretty clearly. So this is what the image looked like out of the camera. And this is what the image looks like after processing it with Darktable. All right, so let's go ahead and compress this guy. So now we're back to the raw file. Now I shot, again, I used an adapted lens, so I really can't do any lens corrections on this, but this image is really all about tones and bringing out tones and color. So let's go into basic adjustments first. And let's just bring the exposure level up. I don't want this to look like the stone was in daylight here, but I do want to bring it up some. As I see, I have a lot of room on my histogram, so I'm just going to go ahead and scroll with my mouse wheel until I get this up pretty well. Maybe make a little black correction. All right, that's getting there. But I've overdone it on my moon here a little bit. The exposure's a little high, but I'm gonna correct that as usual using some other tools. So let's jump into Filmic and see what happens with Filmic here. Since I've already adjusted my middle gray level, I'll set Filmic to be 18.5%, and then I'm just gonna use my white exposure compensation till it looks good to me. And my black. That's pretty good. So I have nice nice contrast in my moon. I haven't lost all the detail there. If I turn Filmic off, you can see that the moon starts to look a little bit too bright, too contrasty to me. So turn Filmic on and I get more detail. I'll bring out some of that contrast later. And I haven't changed very much in my stone except to maybe make the blacks a little bit deeper, which is providing a little bit more contrast. So good. All right, so I'm good there. So now I'm going to go ahead into the color balance module. I'm going to add some saturation to this image. Nice, and I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, not much. I've already done most of what I want to do. A little bit of contrast into the image. Now, I don't like the way this is blocking up over here, and some of these areas of the stone are too dark. So I'm going to use the tone equalizer. So let's take a look here. Let's turn the tone equalizer on so we can see where we are. Our map is pretty well fully contained in here, so I don't think I need to do anything funny with the masking. And I'm going to go over here to my darker areas of the image, and I'm going to bring some light into that area. Bring that tree up a little bit. That's definitely looking better to me. Oh, too far. Overdid it. Maybe bring a little bit up right here. Good, okay, good. Brightened up the image overall without really affecting my my moon. I'm going to go ahead and maybe just dial my moon back a little bit. All right. Tones are generally pretty good. I'm going to jump into my color zones module and I'm going to darken my sky a little bit. So my sky is going to be over here in blue. I'm going to go into lightness. I'm going to just drag my blues down. Yeah, that's better. Darken that sky up a little bit, creates a little bit more contrast. Good. And now I'm going to use my, as I always say, my favorite tool, the contrast equalizer. I'm going to go over here on the big end because that's going to affect my clouds. I really want those clouds to get a little bit more oomph. So I'm going to pull that up. There we go. Yep, that definitely gives the cloud some pop. And then I'll come over here on the fine detail side and pull that up as well, just to bring out some of the details. And I'm going to call that generally pretty good. I brought some noise into the image, into the sky. If I zoom all the way in at 100%, but I can see I have some noise in the sky. I'm going to use denoise profiled. I probably won't have to touch it. Let's see what it looks like when it's done. Okay, I'm quite happy with that, so I'm just going to leave the defaults on denoise profiled. And I'm going to call this image good. So let's jump out of this one and take a look at another one. Okay, so the next image is all about the framing and the light and the juxtaposition of a couple of different elements. So here I have multiple versions of a very, very similar photo as the light was changing. But we're going to take a look at this one. And this is the final version, and I'll do the same thing I did before. I'll take a snapshot of this, and we'll go back here to before any changes were made. There we go. Okay, so this is the raw image out of the camera, and this is the final processed image. Let's turn the snapshot off, reset that. How are we going to get there? Well, you can see I used Filmic again, the color balance, local contrast, contrast equalizer, did some basic adjustments, did a little cropping and rotating, and some more color zones, and then a low pass filter, and vignetting and denoise. Once again, the reason for the low pass filter in this case was adding a little Orton effect. So let's go ahead and run through all that. I'm going to make a duplicate of this to show you a little bit different way. If you wanted to keep your adjustments and try another set of adjustments on the same image, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. I'm going to go into the duplicate, and I'm going to discard the history. So I come down here, I click discard history, and now I have a raw version of the image I've already processed. So I can always go back and look at the one that I did before and not lose my processing changes. Okay, once again, lens correction isn't going to do anything for me because I was using a manual focus lens. I'm going to go ahead, I'll just do the crop and rotate first because I know I want to do that. I'm going to have this be cropped to the original image, and I'm just going to use my scroll wheel here to slightly rotate the image till it looks straight to my eye. There we go. That's pretty good. Let's call that good. Okay. Well, the image is looking a little flat and lacking contrast. We're going to go ahead and make some basic adjustments here. Let's see. Let me go into Filmic, turn on Filmic, and I'm just adjusting my white point and my black points until I have what I think I want in terms of the overall appearance. Check my clipping. Everything's in gamut, so let's take a look at the basic adjustments here. Maybe bring the overall exposure of this image up. Make it a little bit brighter. Turn my overexposure indicator on, and I'm not clipping anywhere, so I'm happy with that. Alright, let's go into color balance. Let's add some saturation to this image. I think it could stand with a pretty fair bit without looking bad, and that's starting to come into play nicely there. Turn up the contrast a little bit. Looking pretty good here, with the exception of I feel like my sky really needs some help. It looks a little bit on the pale side, so I'm going to again go into color zones and I'm going to look at my hue, my saturation, and my lightness of the sky. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull the saturation of the blues down, and the next thing I'm going to do is go into the hue, and I'm going to shift those. Okay, sky's looking a little bit better. I'm going to take a look at where the sky is here in the hue column. I'm going to use control click so I can pick an area here. Okay, so my sky's here, and I want to push it up there just a little bit. Get it more in the blue, less in the cyan. Okay, pretty happy with that. Let's turn that on and off. It's affecting my sky. It's not really affecting the rest of the image. Now I'm going to jump back, take a look at the contrast equalizer, try to get some contrast out in those skies. Let's go down here to this end of the curve. Bring that up a little bit. And maybe we're only going to apply that to the upper, brighter parts of the upper half of the image. Let me see, how's that look down in my trees? Well, I think I'm okay in the trees as well. I'll do that. I'll pull up my fine details. Okay, let's take a look at the previously edited version of this and see where I came to. So that lets me show another option here in Darktable. I can select these two images and go into culling mode, and it'll show them to me side by side. So I can see that I didn't get my colors quite the same with my changes and my light. So this one on the left that I processed before is a little bit warmer, and otherwise they're pretty similar. But I want to see where that warmth came from. So I'm just going to do a little comparison of the settings that I had, and see what I did in color zones on this one. Okay, so color zones in this one, I pulled the lightness down, but I didn't do anything with the saturation or hue. That's interesting. Let's see, what else did I use on this? I did use local contrast, which I haven't done on the other one. Filmic looks pretty close to the same. Color balance, yeah, again, a little bit of saturation, a little bit of contrast. Contrast equalizer, yeah, I pulled up a little bit less on the clouds. Denoising, white balance should be the same. So if I go to the one that I was just working on, let's take a look at the local contrast. We'll bring that punch out a little bit. White balance, as I said, should be the same, but I can warm things up a little bit here. Just dial in a little bit of warmer white balance. Good. Okay. Either image would be satisfying to me. I think I like my initial take on it a little bit better. Not that there's a huge difference between them, but I think the initial take has a little bit of a nicer feel to it. I know one thing I haven't done yet on the new version is my Orton effect. So why don't we do that quickly and remind everybody how that's done. So I'm going to go to the special area and I'm going to apply a low pass filter. I'm going to set my radius to 18. I'm going to bring the brightness up. I'm going to bring the contrast down and the saturation down, and then I'm going to apply this uniformly with a soft light blend mode, and I'm just going to dial it back until it gets where I want it to be. Low pass off, low pass on. Okay, good. That's it for that image. let's switch my light table back to file manager mode so I can see my other images. One more I want to do today, which is all about the sky, and that's this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and open this one up and show you the before and after here. So this image is almost silhouette, but not quite. Let's take a look at what this looks like before and after. We'll take a snapshot of it now, and we'll go ahead back to orientation, and we'll show our snapshot. So this is the raw file. Already had a good bit of drama in it, but didn't have, can't really see any detail in the stacks. And then the updated image, starting to be able to see some of the rust on the stacks without them looking, you know, like they had light shining on them. So we've managed to bring that detail out and still maintain that very dramatic looking sky. And in fact, if anything, the sky's more dramatic. So let's go back to orientation. This is my raw file, compress the history stack. Okay, now I'm basically going to turn up the exposure until I have the detail that I want in the stacks, and I'm not going to worry about what happens to the sky. So I'm going to crank up the exposure. It went up to about 2.5. And now I can get some of the detail here. I could go farther, you know, I could see what it looks like at 3. If I wanted to get, or 4 plus 4 EV, that's probably more than I need. Let's take a look at it at 3. 3 EV is going to give me a little bit more detail than the previously edited version. That's fine. Let's do this a little bit differently. I'm not going to mess around with anything else in basic corrections. So now I'm going to jump into Filmic and turn Filmic on. As always, set my middle gray. The reason I do that is because I've already adjusted the exposure to where I want it to be, so I don't want Filmic to reset middle gray. Now I'm going to dial my whites way down, about 5 EV. Let's check my overexposure indicator. There, just starting to get a little bit of red there. Okay, now my blacks. I'm going to let a little bit go down to pure black down here. I'm okay with that. Good. Come into this, maybe dial back on the latitude a little bit to reduce that amount of clipping, and I think I'm happy with that. But it's made my image look flat. It's taken some of the color out of it and some of the contrast, so we're going to bring that back. I'm going to come to the color balance, really bring in some saturation on this guy. Okay, I'm going to just dial in a little bit of contrast, but not much, because I've already done, I don't really want these blacks to go any blacker. If I do increase any contrast, I'm going to want it to be in the sky, and I can do that selectively. Happy with that. Let's jump into the contrast equalizer and let's pump those skies up. I lost. Okay, well, that's good. So see what happens here if I pump this up. Now I start to block up my shadows again, which I don't want. So how can I fix that? Well, so how are we going to put that effect in the sky without blocking up the stacks? Well, we're going to do that with a parametric mask so we can apply it to the brighter parts of the image, because all the sky, even the dark clouds, are substantially brighter than the stacks. So I'm going to come down here to my parametric mask, and I'm going to use the input slider, turn my mask indicator on. I'm going to use the input slider and start pulling it over. And there you go. I've already eliminated the stacks. Now I can feather this out a little bit so it maybe doesn't equally affect everything. I'm going to use a slight bit of mask feathering and a slight bit of mask blur. And let's turn that mask off. Now we've retained all the detail in the stacks, so if I turn the contrast equalizer off, you can see the effect on the sky. There it's turned on, there it's turned off, but we haven't impacted the stacks. And the way I can tell, the way we can see the change in the stacks is if I come down here and do I need to turn the masking on and off. No mask, there's no mask, and there's the parametric mask. So we can see the detail that came back in the stacks. All right, let's have another instance of the contrast equalizer where I can use it just to bring up the details, the fine details in the image, and I'll apply that all over. All right, a little bit of cropping on this image. I think it just needs a little crop to get rid of this distracting detail down here. Just about there, I think, is good. Let's see what happens with local contrast. Local contrast has a nice effect here. Maybe not so much in the highlights. Off and on, and I'm happy with that image. Let's call that one done. If I wanted to bring out more detail in these stacks, I could without going back to the exposure module. I'll just show you how that would work once again using the tone equalizer. So if I come into the tone equalizer, turn it on, I see my curve is pretty badly offset because of all the exposure compensation that I made. So I've got to, in that case, I've got to come in here and I've got to set the exposure compensation of the mask to move it. That's looking pretty good now. And now I can come over here to the darker areas of my image and I can start to brighten those. Ooh, that jumped a lot. Not sure why that jumped so dramatically, but let's there we go, that's a little bit more. So you could see I could bring back even more detail into the shadow areas of this image if I turn the tone equalizer off. That's what it looks like before. If I turn it on, that's what it looks like after. And it hasn't changed my skies at all, so it's just brought more detail into that. Not what I'm looking for in this case, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And the last thing I'm going to do on this image is again a bit of noise reduction. So we'll turn on denoise, let it do its thing, and that's it. So there's 3 images today, folks. I think that's probably more than enough. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please share it. Please comment, and if you have any images you'd like me to take a look at, send me a message on YouTube, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you, and have a great day.